church of nature. This is a concept I've been thinking about for maybe less than a year or so. When I've started thinking in terms of going out to the church of nature, it was helpful for sealing in a routine for me of going out once a week, at least once a week, to nature, spending time in there. In the book Powered by Nature, I talk about getting out to nature and all the benefits of that, and even a period where I was spending 2 hours out in nature doing stuff there every day. But a human being living a civilized life, get busy with other projects. So sometimes I found I was spending more time in nature, other times not so much. Recently, I was going through a period of the not so much, with a newborn baby and all that. And then I started thinking of, okay, treating it like church. And it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, just that concept of, a routine, once a week type of thing where you're going in for a ritual, for a ceremony, where you're dedicating yourself to this thing. So when I started thinking of nature like that, it helped me get into a routine. And typically I was using Sunday as my church of nature day, and I'd be doing it first thing in the morning. But that wasn't always the case. Sometimes maybe there's certain activities or whatnot going on Sunday, so that wasn't available. I'd switch it to Saturday, do it elsewhere in the week. But I found by thinking of getting out to nature in terms of this church of nature, it was very helpful for me in getting into the weekly routine, the habit of doing it. And I just want to point out with this picture here, just notice that, a lot of, say, cathedrals or whatnot, they're kind of modeled off nature in that, trying to express the awe and inspiration of God, but of beauty and all that. And nature really has that as well. This is a very cool area with, for whatever reason, a lot of the trees are leaning in certain directions. So I thought this was really cool. Kind of denoted that church of nature feel to it. So as I said, this is about that weekly habit, and getting out to nature, if you can, at least 1 hour. You can go longer for sure, oftentimes depending on what I'm doing out in nature. It may be around that 1 hour mark, other times 2-3 hours, really depends on it, but try to get out there for an hour at a time. Now, if you live in a city, to actually get out in nature may take a bit of traveling, but if it's a once a week thing and you build in your routine, if you see the value of it, then by all means you can absolutely make this happen. I chose living in Santa Cruz to live on the outskirts of town, outside, so that nature is within walking distance. I can get out to the forest just by walking less than a mile to get out there. Of course, there's some smaller amounts of nature all around my home, but really getting out into the church of nature where you're surrounded by it, that takes a little bit further for me. Now with this, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do, and personally I like to mix it up. I like to do different activities. If you think of it as church, maybe it's a repetitive type of thing where you're always doing the same thing. If that works for you, by all means go for it, but I like to mix it up. So of course one of the first options is just simply hiking. Going out there, here you're getting the movement, walking around. Most people aren't walking around enough, so hiking in nature is absolutely a great way to go. Getting that movement in the body, you'll be breathing fresh air, all the benefits that come from forest bathing, for instance, or depending on other areas of nature where you're hiking. Something you can do with this is starting out small. If you haven't done any hiking, do a very short trail, but you can build up over time, doing the same trail or adding additional trails or just going for longer things. And of course there are many mile, even multi-day hikes, so you can certainly build up in this to quite some long trails if you choose to go that way. Thought I'd share this sign right here. If you notice, Lost Empire Trail, this was the sign that actually triggered us for getting the name of Lost Empire Herbs. We were brainstorming everything and we couldn't come up with anything. We had Empire Herbs, kind of liked it, but didn't really. We're like, we're going to go out to nature and get a sign from nature, and literally we saw a sign in nature that gave us a name, so I thought that was very cool. And there really is going to be small trails and big trails. You can really mix it up. Now, when you are hiking, if you can do this, I would recommend doing some hiking barefooted. You don't need to do this all the time, but once you get into it, you might find you really like it. Of course, it depends on if there's snow in the ground or stuff like that. You might not want to do this, but if the weather is warm and you're in an area where it feels right, then by all means get grounded. You can get that extra benefits of that electrical connection of earth. I do this many times while walking out in nature. I also have my earth runners, which are grounded sandals so I can have that protection along with the grounding, but even then I often still go barefoot on these hikes in nature. You can do all kinds of other things such as breathing exercises. Here I am doing the abdominal vacuum exercise, and this is in one of my favorite spots that's located in this forest. You can't see a whole lot here, but there's a stream surrounding these rocks. Really cool place. I feel it's like a power point there in nature, and great to do breathing exercises that could be part of your routine in going out to the church. Breathing exercises, doing them any sort of way, absolutely great. And if you can do it deeper in nature, in wilderness, where you have higher oxygen levels from the trees and more clean air just based on the phytoncides and various things that are in there, then it can really enhance the benefits of breathing exercises even further. Next up, I want to talk about what I like to call scouting missions. What am I scouting for? Well, it really goes to this idea, then we'll cover this, but I'm looking for things to forage and things to wildcraft, different foods and herbs that I can get access to and take home with me in the future. If I can, hiking is fun. I really do enjoy that, but I'd like to get a bit more out of my time in nature, if you will, than just simply hiking. If I can come back with food, or with these scouting missions, if I can just have an idea of, oh, there's food to get there later. So, for instance, in this picture, you see a pine tree. Now, I was on this particular day when I took this picture, I was looking for a new spring. I had from findaspring.com the directions to a spring. However, I wasn't able to find it. But in doing this, I happened to find, oh, there's a whole bunch of pine trees here. And that was something I was looking for because I wanted a good spot to wild harvest pine pollen come springtime. I found this in the fall, and we're hitting winter time right now, so this is a scouting mission for the future. This is an idea. I'm going to return to this spot because a whole bunch of pine trees set off from the road, so no issues there, and I'll be able to collect a large amount of pine pollen. I've only gotten little bits here and there in the past, so right now, in the future, I'm very excited to do that. A couple other pictures there. You just never know what you find in nature. Here was a deer skull, which I thought was pretty cool. Also around the same area, here's mullein, which is a herbal remedy I've worked with a little bit in the past, great for breathing and stuff like that. Found some good spots where, although I have not wildcrafted yet, I know where it is and I can get access to it. And so this whole purpose of the scouting mission really is to find these areas that I can then forage for foods or wildcraft herbs. In this picture, I am harvesting acorns. You'll notice I have that big basket behind me. I had, in the previous 2 years, in acorn season, which is around fall time, going on into winter, kind of depends on the types of oaks involved. But I dabbled, I gathered a little bit of acorn and processed it. It's a lot of work in processing, and I'll probably cover acorns and what to do with them in a future video if you're interested in that. But I've dabbled in a little bit. This year I'm like, I'm going to get a whole lot of acorns, enough that can kind of last me through the year. So really going for it. I've already gathered way more than I have in the past, and this is only the start of the season, so I'm going to be gathering much more, which means a whole lot of processing in my future. A couple other things. In one of my scouting missions, I found more manzanita berries than I could possibly even gather if I wanted to. The abundance out in nature can be great. You just have to find the right places, and you have to really kind of dedicate yourself to doing it. That's why I think scouting missions are fun. You get to find these new areas. So I've collected a whole bunch of manzanita, and I've been making manzanita cider for quite some time since then, and still have a whole lot more to go. Pictured on the right side here is St. John's wort. I found some decent areas to harvest it, a little closer to the road than ideally I'd like, but in a scouting mission, I found a place where there's a whole bunch more St. John's wort. However, the time has passed, but I know where that is for around June of next year, where I'll be able to harvest a whole bunch more St. John's wort. I also really like the mushrooms. Mushrooms, even more than the plants in the first place, kind of drew me into nature. On the left side is agaricon, one of the rarest mushrooms in the world. This is on an old-growth Douglas fir, so that was really cool to find. On the right side, this was actually, I believe, my first ever, I'm looking for mushrooms journey, and just brought a whole bunch of stuff back home, much of which I could not ID at all at the time. Eventually I did figure out, oh, there's turkey tail, red-billed conch, artist conch here, as well as a whole bunch more. And just with mushrooms, of course, don't eat mushrooms without knowing what it is, but there is no poisonous mushrooms that are going to poison you just by touching them. It's only through consuming them. So you can pick mushrooms and go and ID them. That's probably another future video I will put out for you here as well. Going out to nature and meditating, I showed you that spot where I did the breathing exercises. Of course, breathing exercises and meditation kind of go hand in hand. If you find a great spot, you can go out and meditate and do that. That's definitely can be a strong part of any Church of Nature routine. Similar to that also is communicating with nature. Inside Powered by Nature, my book, there's a whole chapter on what does it actually take to communicate with nature, to communicate with these plants and herbs as a process. I have wild rose pictured here, which there's the whole story of what my communication with wild rose was, which was pretty interesting to say the least. So there's a whole process to that, using the heart as an organ of sense perception and how you actually go about doing that. And of course, Buhner's book, The Secret Teachings of Plant, goes much further with it. But this is something that I often do. I'm not only wildcrafting or scouting out, but going out to find new herbs and new plants, or old friends really too, to communicate with in this manner. Now, many times when I'm doing Church and Nature, I do it as a solo routine, but other times I do it with my family, which may involve my wife, may involve my baby, Elka out here. I thought this was a fun picture, one of her first times just like sitting out by herself. Of course, I wasn't too far away, but showing this picture to my wife, she's like, why are you so far away from Elka? But oftentimes with the Church of Nature, it may be a family outing. That's fine. So I'm not necessarily going to be meditating or sitting down, taking the time to communicate with the plants on the level I normally do, nor necessarily foraging, depending on what's going on. But it can be a little bit of a different trip going solo versus going with other people. You'll notice in most of this that it's a forest. I mentioned that I really like the forest. That calls to me more so than many other environments. And that's probably also a video I will do in the future, really kind of helping people to identify what is the kind of major natural environment that speaks to them. Most people definitely already have a sense of this, but it can be something helpful to think about. That being said, on my Church of Nature, I do try to switch it up from time to time. The forest is kind of my fallback routine because it is nearby, but different locations here. So here I am out on the ocean, was boating. This was actually a crabbing and fishing trip from this, which was, foraging for food out on the ocean. So it was a little bit different. Also related to this is if you want to go deeper in any of this stuff, especially the foraging, the wildcrafting, identifying herbs, different things like that, there's very likely going to be classes available in your area. If you look it up online, different things. The picture here, this was from a seaweed foraging class that I attended. So I live on the coast, so I had to drive a couple hours in order to take this class. But I learned about, when, at what times, and looking at a tide chart to know when are the times you can go and collect the seaweed. Learned how to identify seaweed, and of course got a whole bunch of it. I mean, this class I think was like a year and a half ago now, and we still have more seaweed than we know what to do with, just because you can get so much of it in relatively little effort if you know what to do, which actually is not that hard, but a class will teach you, and that's all it takes. So these are just a few ideas. Church of Nature, for me, it's like a mental framework. It is something that helps me wrap my mind and my routine in my life around getting out to nature at least once a week. And I have to say, since I started doing this, I believe I've done it without fail. Maybe I missed 1 week just because I was traveling so much, and I don't know if that travel involved nature time, so I may have missed 1 week. But other than that, this has really helped me cement into my routine, getting out to nature, doing the various things I've talked about here, and so much more. If you have any questions on this video triggered any questions for you or comments, please share them below, and let's get the conversation started.